Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from right now? Especially if you've ever gone hiking off-grid. My throat was almost closed. I could barely breathe. My vision was going black. And then, a falcon landed just a few feet away, wearing a bell. And for some reason, it wanted me to follow it. We thought we were prepared. We weren't. My friend and I had picked southeastern New Mexico for a 10-mile hike through some remote backcountry neither of us had ever stepped foot in. We were looking for something different, something off-grid, away from the crowds, no marked paths, no friendly park rangers nearby. Just a map, a compass, a few supplies, and the two of us trying to feel like we'd earned something by the end of it. We had planned it for weeks. I packed light but smart, extra water, protein bars, a cheap first aid kit, some allergy meds I never thought I'd actually need. My friend did most of the route planning, but I insisted on tracking our path in and out, just in case. There was no cell service where we were headed, and that was half the point. The terrain out there wasn't what I expected. It wasn't just dry and rocky. It was jagged, harsh. There were steep ridges that dropped into sudden river valleys, patches of strange brush that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. The land felt old, in a way you can't quite put your finger on. Like it had been sitting there long before any of us ever showed up to mess with it. We didn't see a single person once we left the car. No hikers, no campers, nothing. Just us, the wind, and a trail that was more imagined than real. Even the birds were quiet once we got deeper in. We cracked a few jokes about it at first, how we must have picked the most boring spot in New Mexico. Still, the views were incredible. Climbing up to a ridge, you could see forever in every direction. Miles of empty land, scrub brush, and sandstone. And then we found this narrow path that led down into a river valley. It wasn't on the map, and we hadn't planned to descend, but we were curious. That was probably our first mistake. Looking back, there was a strange stillness about that valley. Not peaceful, just still. No wind, no bugs. Even the sound of our own footsteps seemed to get swallowed up once we were down there. It was like we had stepped into a place the world had forgotten. And that's where everything started to go wrong. We started down into the valley because it looked like the kind of place you'd only see if you wandered off the main trail. The descent wasn't steep at first, just a winding slope with loose rocks and narrow switchbacks, but as we got deeper, the air started to shift. It got heavier somehow. Like everything was holding its breath. At first, I thought it was just the drop in elevation, or maybe the thick scrub lining the path, but there was something strange about it. The temperature felt off. Cooler, but not refreshing. Damp, in a way that clung to your skin. The farther we went, the more it felt like we had stepped out of the New Mexico we knew and into someplace else entirely. Even the sounds changed. The wind had followed us all morning, whipping over the ridges, rattling through dry grass. But down there? Nothing. The birds that had chirped from the rocks earlier? Gone. Even the buzzing of flies or the occasional rustle in the brush just stopped. I kept noticing it, and the quiet wasn't calming. It was sharp, awkward, like we didn't belong. And then I brushed up against something. Some weird plant with jagged waxy leaves and this fine red powder along the stems. I didn't think anything of it, just kept moving, wiped my hand on my shirt. We were still on track, still following the natural curve of the valley. We figured it would open up to a stream at some point, maybe a good spot to rest before heading back out. But within 10 minutes, I felt the first itch. Just a tiny spot on my forearm. Then another. Then both arms. Then my neck. I looked down, and my skin was blotchy. Red. Raised. I didn't say anything at first. I've had rashes before. Figured it was something mild. Allergies. Maybe. A reaction to the plant. I told myself it would pass. Then my throat started to feel thick. Like I was trying to breathe through a cotton ball shoved behind my tongue. My voice cracked when I tried to call out to my friend, and that's when I knew it wasn't something I could shrug off. I stopped walking, grabbed my pack, and ripped out the small bottle of Benadryl. Popped 2 tablets dry and forced myself to swallow. I didn't mention how hard it was to get them down. I could already feel the swelling, deep inside, like my own body was tightening around my windpipe. We turned around fast. Didn't even argue about it. No pictures. No exploring. Just get out. The climb was brutal. Every step back up that slope felt longer than it had coming down. The sun was hotter now, baking the rocks and making the air feel thinner. My shirt was drenched in sweat. I couldn't focus. My head was buzzing, not with sound, but with pressure, like something pushing from the inside. I started wheezing. Not loud at first, more like a dry click every time I tried to inhale deep. I knew what was coming, and the fear hit hard. I had never gone into anaphylaxis before, but I wasn't dumb. I knew the signs. And I knew if I passed out in that valley, there'd be no helicopter rescue. No paramedic racing down a trail. Just two guys in the middle of nowhere and one of them choking on nothing. I remember the sound of my own breathing more than anything else. Scratchy. Uneven. Then there were moments where I couldn't hear it at all, and that scared me more than anything. It was like someone had turned down the volume of the world and left me stuck inside my own head. My legs felt like they were moving through sand. I couldn't keep up. My friend kept checking on me, trying to talk, but his voice sounded far away, like he was underwater. My ears were ringing. My pulse was pounding so loud it felt like it was coming from inside my skull. I wanted to rest. Just for a minute. Sit on a rock. Close my eyes. Let the dizziness pass. But I knew if I stopped, I might not get up again. I remember reaching the top of the valley and thinking I might just drop right there. My legs were trembling, like the strength had drained out of them all at once. My throat felt like it had shrunk to the size of a pencil, every breath a short, wheezing pull. The light was strange, too bright, but also flickering in places. My eyes weren't working the way they should have been. Then I heard it. A flutter. Fast. Sharp. Followed by this light, metallic sound. A jingle. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. The sound was so out of place that it didn't even register as real. But I turned my head, slow and heavy like it was full of sand, and there it was. A falcon. Sitting on a branch just a few feet from us. Not moving, not calling out. Just watching. And around its neck, a small bell. That part stuck with me. That bell. It rang in a way that made no sense. We were in the middle of nowhere. There shouldn't have been a bird, let alone one wearing jewelry. I blinked hard and tried to focus. My friend saw it too. He even said something like, "What the hell?" But I could barely hear him. We kept moving. I didn't think about the bird again for a minute because all I could think about was how badly I needed air. Every step was work. Every breath, a fight. I was supposed to be leading us out, but my head was foggy. I was walking slower, thinking slower, and then I turned the wrong way. I didn't realize it at first. We were following a ridge, and I just veered right when we should have gone left. My friend asked if I was sure, and I remember snapping something back, even though I wasn't. I just didn't want to stop moving. Then I heard it again. The jingle. The falcon was back. This time on a different branch, right above the trail we had just passed. It flapped its wings once, just enough to draw our eyes, and perched again. Watching. Phil. Almost expectant. I swear it was waiting for me to notice. There was something about the way it moved. It didn't seem scared. Didn't act like other birds. It flew ahead just a little, then stopped. When we didn't follow fast enough, it flapped again, louder this time. Almost impatient. I don't know why I followed it. I didn't even think about it. My legs just started moving that way. My friend hesitated at first, but then he saw me go, and that was enough. The falcon kept moving, flying from tree to tree, but never far. It stayed just ahead, leading, and the strange thing, the trail started to look right, familiar. But I couldn't tell if we were actually moving faster or if my mind was slipping. Everything around me felt warped, bent, like the trees were making space for us. I know that sounds strange, but that's the feeling I had, like the forest wasn't getting in our way anymore. I tried to speak at one point, to say something about the bird, or maybe ask how far we had left, but my voice didn't come out. Just a dry croak and a cough that nearly dropped me to my knees. My vision was swimming. My fingers were numb. I couldn't even tell if my legs were working on their own or if I was just being pulled forward by momentum. But that falcon, it kept going. And we followed. Then, through the blur, I saw it. A flash of color that didn't belong. The glint of metal. The shape of the car. Our car. Parked exactly where we had left it, like a tiny beacon waiting at the edge of the world. And the falcon? Gone. Just like that. 1 second it was there, the next, nothing. No jingle. No wings. No sign. Like it had done its job and vanished. I collapsed into the passenger seat like a sack of bones. I couldn't even pull the door shut. My friend had to reach across and slam it closed while I fumbled with the seatbelt. My hands wouldn't work. My chest was tight. My ears were ringing so loud it felt like everything outside the car was gone. No wind. No gravel under the tires. Just that ringing, and my own rasping breath. My friend didn't waste a second. He slammed the car into gear and tore out of the lot like his own life depended on it. I could feel the speed in the way my head rocked back against the seat, but everything felt slowed down. Like watching a movie that was buffering. Trees whipped past us, but they didn't register as separate things anymore. Just streaks of green and brown, smudging into one another. And then, right before we made the first turn onto the highway, we both saw it. The falcon. It circled once, wide and high over the trailhead. Its wings caught the sun just for a second, enough to flash that bell around its neck. That tiny sound, that little jingle, cut through the noise in my head like a thread. And then it turned, sharp and clean, and disappeared over the treetops. That was the last we saw of it. I don't know how long the drive took. I passed in and out. I remember the sky flashing through the window, and then the roof of the car, and then my friend yelling at someone to move. At one point, I heard the squeal of brakes. At another, the slam of a door. The rest is kind of gone. I do remember the clinic. Or maybe just pieces of it. A fluorescent light. Someone pulling at my shirt. The cold sting of something pressed into my thigh. A burst of sharp heat, like fire in my veins. And then, black. Nothing. Stillness, like I'd fallen into a hole that didn't echo. When I opened my eyes, there was quiet. Real quiet. But it didn't scare me anymore. I was alive. I knew that part first, before I even remembered the valley, or the climb, or the bird. I just knew I'd come back from somewhere that didn't want me leaving. Later, the doctor told me if we'd gotten there just a few minutes later, I probably wouldn't have made it. My airways had almost completely closed. He said it was lucky. That was the word he used. Lucky. I laid there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, letting it all settle. And somewhere, in the corner of my mind, I could still hear the bell. Faint. But there. I stayed in the clinic overnight. The swelling went down, slowly. Breathing became easier. But my mind. That took longer. I kept thinking about how fast everything had happened. How quickly a quiet hike had turned into something I still can't fully explain. The next morning, after I was cleared to leave, we made a quick stop at the ranger station. Just to ask. Just to see if anyone had reported a missing falcon. I even described the bell. Silver, small, not something that belonged in the wild. The ranger gave me a look that said he thought I was still a little out of it. He told us no one had reported anything like that. No licensed falconers in the region. No bird rescue groups nearby. No tags, no projects, nothing. Somebody had to own it. Falcons don't just wear bells for fun. But what are the odds it'd find us? Right then. In that place. With no signal, no traffic, no real trail markers? My friend laughed and called it a guardian angel. I laughed too, but only because I didn't know what else to do with the silence that came after. It's weird, the things your brain won't let go of. I didn't see a harness. I didn't see tags. Just a bell. And dark eyes that didn't blink the way you'd expect. They were fixed. Phil. Like they were watching more than just us. Like they were waiting for something. I don't think it was just some trained bird that wandered off. And I still wonder, was it helping us? Or was it just making sure we got out? That was 3 years ago. I haven't been back to New Mexico. But sometimes, if I hear a bell in the distance, I stop and look up. And if you've ever had something, or someone, show up at just the right moment, tell me in the comments. You might just be in the next story. Like and subscribe for more real horror. I post weekly. I called out to the man in the dark woods. I begged him to speak, to move. But he just stood there, back turned, like he was waiting for something. Let me know in the comments. Where in the world are you watching this from? I'd done this plenty of times before. Pack a bit of food, throw a sleeping bag over my shoulder, and head out to the woods for a quiet night under the trees. No tent. No real plan. Just space to breathe and a chance to get away from everything for a few hours. The forest I usually went to wasn't far. Maybe a half-hour walk from my flat if you didn't stop too much. You could still hear the city in the distance sometimes, but that didn't bother me. Honestly, it felt comforting. Like you were just far enough away to pretend you'd vanished, without actually being gone. That summer evening, the air was warm and still, and the walk was easy. I'd done this route enough times to barely pay attention to where my feet were going. I knew the good spots, the flat ground, the places where the wind didn't cut through as hard. I wasn't chasing adventure. I just wanted a decent night's rest, under the stars, away from the hum of apartment walls and flickering streetlights. Everything about that night felt ordinary. The sky was clear. My pack was light. I even brought one of those pre-packed dinners and a cold drink. It was shaping up to be one of those quiet, forgettable little nights you barely remember the next morning. At least, that's what I thought at the time. I reached the spot just as the last bit of daylight was hanging in the trees. It wasn't pitch dark yet, but it was getting there. You know that time when everything turns bluish, and the edges of things start to disappear? That's when I laid out my sleeping bag and sat down to eat. The ground was soft enough, the trees were spaced out wide, and I could still hear the hum of the city way off behind me. Just a low buzz of engines and the occasional horn. Far enough to feel alone. Close enough to know I wasn't. The woods around me were quiet, mostly. Trees rustling, birds settling in, the usual. Every now and then I'd catch what sounded like music. Real faint. Like someone had a speaker playing down the hill, way out of sight. Could have been a party, or maybe just some teenagers messing around. I didn't think much of it. I've heard stranger things out there. Still, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't anything big. No shadows darting around or weird noises jumping out at me. It was just this stillness. Not the peaceful kind, either. The kind that makes you feel like you're being timed. Like the forest is waiting for you to do something first. I told myself I was just wound up. That it was city stress sticking to my skin like sweat. I tried brushing it off, focusing on the usual stuff, what I'd do the next day, what I'd eat for breakfast, whether I remembered to lock the door at home. But that feeling hung around, quiet and patient. Eventually I lay down, pulled the bag over me, and stared up at the sky. The stars were out by then. The kind of clear you don't get unless you're out in the open. And even though it should have been peaceful, cool breeze, full stomach, perfect silence, I couldn't sleep. I'd start to doze, then snap awake like I'd heard something. Then again. And again. One time, I could have sworn I heard a twig snap. Just one. Like a single step. Then nothing. There were also these faint echoes. I don't even know how to explain them. Laughter, maybe. Or people shouting, but in that way where it's so far off you can't tell if it's joy or panic. Sometimes I think it was just my mind filling in the blanks. But even then, something didn't sit right. You ever get that feeling when your brain tells you there's someone else nearby? No real reason. No sound. No sign. Just that quiet, gnawing certainty that you're not completely alone. That something or someone is out there, just far enough away that you can't see them. But they can see you. That's how it felt. I kept telling myself I was overthinking it. That it was all in my head. Still, I found myself sitting up, looking around. Trying to hear past the usual forest sounds. Every little noise started to mean something. Every rustle felt just a bit too close. Sleep came in short bursts. I'd drift off for a few minutes, then wake up convinced I heard footsteps. Or breathing. Or nothing at all. Just this buzzing in my ears and the pounding of my own heartbeat reminding me how awake I still was. I should have felt safe. I was only 30 minutes from home. This wasn't the deep woods or some forgotten trail. I'd been here before. I knew this place. But that night, it didn't feel like it knew me back. By around 4 in the morning, I gave up on sleep. I'd probably closed my eyes a dozen times, but they never stayed shut. Every little shift in the wind or rustle in the grass pulled me back. My brain just wouldn't let go of that feeling. That someone was out there. Watching. Waiting. Or maybe nothing was. That was the worst part. Never really knowing. You can tell yourself it's just nerves, but when it keeps you awake that long, you start to listen a little closer. You start to believe your own paranoia. I sat up, zipped up my pack, and figured I'd just head home. It wasn't far. I knew the path like the back of my hand. I figured I could walk it slow, take my time, and at least get a few hours of real rest in my own bed. That felt better than sitting out there for 3 more hours pretending I'd ever fall asleep. The forest was quiet. I mean really quiet. Earlier I could hear the city. Car engines, someone shouting in the distance, even a bit of music. But now it was like someone turned the whole world off. No hum. No wind. Just the crunch of dirt under my boots and the faint sound of my own breathing. And even that started to feel too loud. I was maybe 5 or 10 minutes into the walk when I saw him. At first, I thought it was just a tree. You know how they sometimes look like people if you catch them at the right angle? I was half asleep, a little disoriented, so I figured I was just seeing things. But no, it was a man. Standing about 20 feet ahead of me, right in the middle of the trail. Facing away. Perfectly still. Just standing there. Like he'd been waiting for something. I stopped. Didn't want to get too close until I understood what I was looking at. I called out, just loud enough to carry without echoing. Hey, you all right? Nothing. No turn of the head. No shuffle. Just still. I cleared my throat, took a small step forward. Hello? Can you hear me? Still no answer. At first, I thought maybe he had headphones in. Or maybe he was asleep standing up. People do weird things when they're drunk or lost. So I kept trying. Excuse me, do you need help? I tried again. Louder this time. Then in a second language. Switched back and tried again. I must have asked 6 or 7 times. First politely. Then firmly. Then with a little more edge to my voice. The kind that says I'm done being polite and I need to know what this is. Nothing. He didn't flinch. Didn't breathe loud enough to hear. Just kept standing there, with his back to me, like he didn't even know I existed. And I stood there, waiting for him to move. To say something. Anything. My throat went dry from talking. My legs started to ache from just standing. My nerves were frayed. I checked my phone out of instinct, though I already knew I had no signal. Every few seconds I looked around, half expecting someone else to appear, like this was a prank, or I was being messed with. But it wasn't. It was just me and him. And he wasn't giving me anything. 10 minutes passed like that. 10 minutes of talking to someone who didn't so much as twitch. 10 minutes of silence so thick I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I remember thinking, what if he never moves? What if I'm stuck here waiting for someone who isn't even real? Then, just when I was thinking about walking back the way I came, he moved. Slowly. No sound. No shift in his shoulders. Just this slow, quiet walk forward. Away from me. Down the same trail I needed to take to get home. And that was somehow worse. That he moved, but didn't respond. That after everything I said, after all the pleading and questions and tension hanging in the air, he just walked away like I was never there. Now I had a choice. I could follow him, risk getting too close, maybe having to pass by him at some point, or I could take the long way around. A detour that would stretch my walk by a good half hour, maybe more. I stood there, watching his figure get smaller in the distance. Every instinct in me screamed, don't follow. Don't let him know you're behind him. So I turned off the trail and took the long way home. I didn't look back right away. I just stepped off the path and kept moving, following the trees on instinct more than anything else. I'd walked this area before during the day, So I knew if I kept heading at an angle, I'd eventually hit a bike trail that looped back toward the city. It wasn't the route I'd planned to take, but at that moment, planning felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. My steps were quick but quiet. I didn't want to hear them echo. Every sound felt like it wasn't supposed to be there. My bag brushing against branches, the occasional crunch of dried leaves. They weren't loud, but they felt loud. My brain amplified everything. Every few minutes, I looked over my shoulder. And when I wasn't looking back, I was scanning ahead. My head never sat still. My eyes kept bouncing between trees, trying to find anything that didn't belong. I wasn't just afraid of seeing him again. I was afraid I'd miss him until it was too late. That's the thing about fear. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just whispers constantly in your ear, reminding you that something's off. That your body's on high alert for a reason, even if you can't explain it. I didn't hear anything out there. No footsteps. No voices. Nothing to suggest anyone had followed me. And still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't actually left him behind. The detour stretched longer than I expected. Maybe it was the dark or the tension or just the way the forest never seemed to open up, but time stopped feeling like time. I kept checking my phone even though I knew there was no signal. I kept checking my watch, surprised at how little time had passed. It felt like I'd been walking for hours. And every now and then, I'd think about that first moment I saw him. The way he stood there. How still he was. How unnatural that kind of stillness felt. I tried to picture his face, but I never saw it. Only his back. That was the worst part. The not knowing. The silence. The lack of anything human in his behavior. Eventually, I started to see signs of the city again. Distant lights glowing between the trees. A low throb of traffic, muffled but unmistakable. And something in me started to breathe a little easier. I didn't slow down though. I couldn't. Not yet. I just wanted to reach the sidewalk. Just put my feet on pavement and know that whatever that had been, it was behind me. There was one last bend in the trail before it opened up toward the road. I knew it was coming. I'd taken this path before on early morning runs. I could already see the glow of a street lamp past the trees. But right before the curve, I paused. Something caught my eye. Just to the left, a few feet behind a thick tree trunk. I saw it. Movement. It was quick. Subtle. Like someone pulling back ever so slightly the moment they realized they'd been spotted. I froze. Stared. By the time I looked straight at it, it was gone. No sound. No footsteps. Nothing there but the tree and the space behind it. I stood still for maybe 5 seconds. 10 at most. Then I walked. Past. Eyes forward, heart racing, throat dry. I didn't look back again. I didn't need to. Because whatever it was, it already knew where I was. I made it home just as the first hint of daylight crept over the rooftops. I didn't bother unpacking. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I don't even remember falling asleep. Just that I kept blinking up at the ceiling, waiting for something to feel normal again. It didn't. That morning, my body wanted to shut down, but my head wouldn't let it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure again. Just standing there. Still. Heavy. Like someone had pressed pause on a person. And then that slow movement, the way he walked away without ever acknowledging me. It played on repeat. Every frame burned into memory, whether I wanted it or not. I told myself he was probably just drunk. Or high. Or dealing with something in his own world. I tried to make that idea stick. But it never felt solid. Because if you had stood where I stood, if you had felt what I felt, you wouldn't have bet on that either. There was something off. Deeply off. And I've never really shaken that. I never went wild camping alone again after that. I still hike. Still get out there. But there's always someone else now. A friend. A group. Noise. I need that noise. That presence. Because that kind of silence, that kind of stillness, I don't want to feel it again. And sometimes, late at night, I'll catch myself wondering, what if I hadn't turned away? What if I had followed him? Was that the point? Was I supposed to? I'll never know. And honestly, I don't think I want to. I still pass that forest sometimes, and I still think about what might have happened if I'd followed him. Have you ever seen something, or someone, that just wasn't right? Drop your story in the comments. I might feature it next time. I woke up to the sound of something sprinting past my tent. Heavy, fast, and too close. I thought I was alone in the wilderness. But something out there was breathing hard, circling. Before we start, where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments. It was supposed to be a quiet trip. 4 of us, just friends looking to disconnect, loaded up our gear and set out on a 4-day canoe run down one of the remote rivers in Victoria, Australia. No roads, no ranger stations, no nearby towns. Just us, our canoes, and the kind of wild that doesn't care whether you make it back or not. The first 2 days were easy. The river flowed smooth, the air stayed warm, and at night we'd pull into a clearing by the bank, set up our tents, light a fire, and talk until the stars faded behind the tree line. We had the kind of laughs that only come when you've got nowhere to be and no signal to remind you that the rest of the world is still out there. Everything about it felt good, real, uncomplicated. By the 3rd day, we'd covered a lot of distance. That night, we pulled into a spot that barely looked like a campsite. It wasn't marked on any map. You wouldn't even know it existed if you weren't coming in from the water. It was quiet, overgrown, and cut off from anything man-made. We liked that. It felt like a reward for going that far. We unloaded the canoes, set up the tents, and stretched out for a while under the fading sun. There was no rush, no agenda, just the thought of firewood, maybe dinner, and eventually sleep. At the time, I remember thinking how peaceful it all was. That kind of peace that only comes when you're far enough away from everything to forget it even exists. I had no idea how different that night would be. After the tents were pitched and the gear stashed away, one of the girls, Sophie, nudged me and asked if I'd help her look for firewood. The others were sorting out dinner stuff, so we figured we'd take a short walk and see what we could scrounge up before dark. We weren't expecting much, maybe a few dry branches, kindling if we were lucky. We headed off down this narrow little trail that looked like it had been used by animals more than people. The bush out there was thick, but it wasn't quiet. You could still hear birds going off in the distance and that low hum of insects that never really stops. We were maybe 10 minutes in when we both caught it at the same time. The smell. It hit like a wave. Thick, sour, something between rotting meat and wet dog, but worse. It made you want to breathe through your shirt, only your shirt didn't help. We looked at each other, both pausing mid-step. She said, "God, what is that?" And I didn't have an answer. It didn't feel like it came from one direction. It was just around us, in the air, in our hair, clinging to the inside of your nose. Like the smell had weight to it. We kept walking, half thinking we'd stumble across a dead kangaroo or some poor wombat that didn't make it. I remember saying something dumb, like, maybe something dragged a carcass out here. Sophie didn't laugh. She just kept walking, slower now. Then we saw it, this mound off to the side of the trail. It didn't look natural. The way the sticks and branches were piled up, it wasn't random. It looked built, thrown together with a kind of rush. Like someone, or something, had tried to cover something quickly. Neither of us said anything for a moment. We just stared at it. Then she stepped a little closer and nudged one of the top branches off with her shoe. I didn't stop her. I should have. The smell got stronger, like it had been trapped inside that pile and we just cracked it open. I squatted down next to it and gently peeled away a few more layers with a stick. I honestly thought I was about to see fur. Or something worse. There was nothing. Just dirt and old leaves and a few dry bones that looked like they belonged to a bird or something small. We stood there for another minute, not sure what to make of it. Sophie finally shook her head and said, "Dead roo, probably. Dragged off and half buried. Let's just go." So we did. We left the pile, and the smell, and walked back in silence for a while. Then one of us made a joke about zombie kangaroos or something ridiculous like that, and we forced a laugh, hoping it would shake off whatever weird energy had settled over us. Back at camp, the other two had the fire going. We tossed the wood down, didn't say much about what we saw. Just told them it stunk out there and to maybe avoid that trail. They laughed and said it must have been roadkill, even though there weren't any roads anywhere near us. That night we sat around the fire, roasting marshmallows and trying to feel normal again. And for the most part, we did. We talked nonsense, played music off someone's old speaker, and stared up at the stars like they were the safest things in the world. Still, every now and then, I'd catch Sophie glancing toward the tree line. She was thinking about that pile. So was I. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it wasn't the usual rustling of trees or the calls of night birds that did it. It was this sound, deep and guttural, like a cough, but not quite. Rough, short bursts that didn't sound human, and didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard either. It wasn't far. It was close. Too close. I lay there, still in my sleeping bag, listening. The cough came again. Short, wet, then silence. I thought maybe one of the girls had gotten up and was choking on smoke or something. Maybe someone had gotten sick. I waited, hoping I'd hear a zipper or a voice or something that would explain it. Instead, I heard running. Fast. Heavy. It came from the left and tore through the center of our camp like it had somewhere to be. You could hear the weight of it, whatever it was, pounding the dirt, kicking up gravel, maybe even brushing against one of the tents. And then nothing. No slowing down. No retreat. Just gone. That's when the dread hit. We were completely isolated. Water access only. There wasn't a single road, driveway, or hiking trail within miles. No ranger posts. No other campers. It was just us. We had paddled in, and we'd have to paddle out. And now something was out there, circling our tents in the dark, running through our camp like it belonged there. I didn't move. I barely breathed. My mind was running through every possibility I didn't want to consider. What if someone followed us in? What if we had come across something we weren't meant to see earlier that day? That pile. That smell. Maybe we'd interrupted something. Disturbed it. And just like that, the smell returned. Thick and sour, but sharper now. Like it had been dragged across the camp and left to hang in the air. It was stronger than it had been earlier. No more guessing where it came from. It was here. It was outside my tent. I wanted to call out. I wanted to ask if anyone else was awake. But the thought of making a sound froze me more than the cold ever could. I lay there with my eyes wide open in the dark, waiting to hear the zipper of my tent being pulled down. I actually started rehearsing what I'd do if it happened. If someone tried to come in. If I had to fight. And then, slowly, I reached for the headlamp by my side. My fingers shook. I didn't want the noise, so I didn't unzip the sleeping bag. I just pushed myself toward the edge of the tent and moved my hand toward the zipper, 1 inch at a time. Every movement felt like a gamble. When I finally started to pull the zipper down, I did it slow enough that I could hear every single tooth let go of the one above it. I expected something, anything, to crash through at me. Nothing. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Maybe more. I switched on the light. Silence. No coughing. No footsteps. No wind. The forest was quiet in a way that didn't feel earned. It was the kind of quiet that had weight to it. No birds. No crickets. Just me, my breathing, and whatever had been out there a few seconds ago. I aimed the beam through the mesh. The light cut across the camp and landed on something that made no sense at all. Eyes. Dozens of them. Pairs of tiny glowing eyes scattered everywhere. Up in the trees, on the ground, behind our cooking gear. Phil. Watching. And in that frozen moment, my brain finally caught up to what I was looking at. Possums. Huge, bulky possums. One was chewing something. Another waddled across the site like it owned the place. One climbed a tent pole and leapt off with the grace of a drunk cat. They were raiding our leftovers. Our marshmallows. All of them. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. I didn't even feel relief. I just sat there, stunned. Because for a few terrifying minutes, I thought I wasn't going to make it out of that tent alive. And all the while, it was a bunch of overfed possums having a late-night party. But I'll tell you this, I never found where that smell was coming from. And to this day, I'm still not convinced it was all just possums. I thought I was seeing things at first. My light hit the trees, and suddenly the whole place lit up with eyes. Dozens of them. Tiny, glassy dots, all reflecting back at me. Some were high, some low, some sitting just beyond the fire pit, motionless, like statues in the dark. I didn't blink. I couldn't. They weren't blinking either. It was as if I'd disturbed a meeting, and now every single one of them had turned to look. I slowly swept the beam across the camp, and more eyes popped into view. 1 pair. Then 3. Then 10. Then 20. They were up in the branches, behind our bags, on the edge of the tents, just waiting. And then all hell broke loose. Out of nowhere, they started scrambling. One leapt from a branch and landed with a thud right near the fire pit. Another darted between the tents, dragging something white and sticky in its mouth. It was marshmallows. One of them had an entire bag, tearing it open with a sound that was way too aggressive for its size. Another hissed, an actual loud hiss, at a smaller one trying to get in on the loot. That one lunged, they rolled, they tumbled. Screeching, snapping, a full-on brawl. Possums. Big, wild, brush-tail possums. And not just a few, this was a mob. They weren't shy. They weren't afraid. They were marching in like they'd done this before. One of them climbed onto our cooler and pawed at it like it had the code. Another ran right up to the edge of my tent and stared me down like it was daring me to do something about it. They were everywhere, clawing through wrappers, chasing each other, falling out of trees, stealing whatever they could get. I just sat there, light still on, mouth probably wide open, watching the chaos unfold like some kind of backwoods wildlife documentary, except it was happening 5 feet away. It was loud, it was messy, it was absolutely ridiculous. Marshmallows flying, squeals echoing, one of them dragging a whole bag like it had won the lottery. And that's when it hit me. All that fear, all that tension. The coughing, the thudding steps, the stench in the air. I had built up this idea of something stalking us, some silent figure watching, waiting. I had imagined something far worse. Turns out, we weren't being hunted. We were being looted. Ambushed by sugar-crazed possums who probably knew campers meant snacks. It was a junk food turf war. A brush-tail riot. But in that moment, it wasn't funny. It wasn't even annoying. It was wild. It felt like the forest had come alive and decided we owed it something. And we paid in marshmallows. I didn't sleep after that. I tried. I closed my eyes, lay back down, even zipped the tent up halfway like that would make a difference. But my ears stayed on. Every little rustle made me twitch. Every crunch in the brush had me wide awake again, clutching the light. The possums eventually quieted down. One by one, they disappeared into the trees like ghosts melting into the leaves. But the quiet didn't feel peaceful. It just felt like they were waiting for round 2. The girls slept like nothing happened. All 3 of them, dead to the world. I kept glancing at their tents, half expecting someone to pop out and say, "Did you hear that?" But nothing. Not a peep. I was the only one who saw it, the only one who heard that weird cough, who watched possums ransack a campsite like they were pulling off a coordinated heist. By morning, it looked like a storm had come through. Food wrappers shredded everywhere. Our cooking pot had rolled halfway into the trees. There were muddy little footprints over the tents, through the ashes, across the side of someone's sleeping bag. A plastic bag that used to hold our bread was hanging from a branch like a sad, white flag. They laughed when I told them. Thought I'd had a sugar dream or something. One of them said I probably spooked myself, imagining it all. But the evidence was right there in the dirt. They just didn't want to believe it. I didn't argue. But I kept thinking about that smell. We never found it again. It vanished with the night. And that mound? The one we thought might be covering something? No one wanted to go back and check. We joked that it was probably a dead kangaroo and left it at that. But sometimes I wonder, what if it wasn't? What if we uncovered part of something and didn't realize it? We packed up quick, ate dry granola bars for breakfast and paddled out before noon. That trip was supposed to be one of those lifelong memories, the kind you talk about over drinks years later. And it was. Just not in the way any of us expected. I haven't been camping since. I tell people I'm too busy or that I've outgrown it. But truth is, I just don't trust the silence out there anymore. Possums don't build stick mounds. And they definitely don't smell like rotting flesh. So whatever we found out there, I don't think it was them. If you've ever had a terrifying encounter in the wild, or think you know what we really found that night, drop it in the comments. I might feature your story next. I woke up to the sound of something unzipping my tent, and I was supposed to be alone. Before we dive in, type where you're watching from, your city, your country. Let's see how far the shadows stretch. It was supposed to be a quick getaway. Just me and my buddy, 2 nights out in the Central Cascades. We'd picked a route out of Skycomish, Washington, nothing too extreme, just far enough to leave the world behind for a bit. The kind of trip where you carry everything on your back and sleep wherever the ground looks soft enough. That's what we wanted. Silence, pine, and a break from notifications. We started off early that Friday. The trail wound through dense forest, tall trees on every side, and patches of light breaking through the branches overhead. It smelled like moss and cold air, and every step took us deeper into what felt like another world. Eventually, after a few hours, we made it to a small subalpine lake. Clear water, quiet breeze, no one around for miles. It was perfect. We set up camp right by the shore, ate freeze-dried meals that tasted better than they should have, and joked about how we needed to do this more often. Everything about that first evening felt calm. The sun dipped behind the peaks, and the whole place was dipped in a soft golden haze. We talked, laughed, threw a couple rocks in the water, and finally crawled into our tents. It was the kind of quiet you don't get anywhere near cities. No cars, no hum of streetlights, just the distant creak of trees and the occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface. And then, night came. It was still. The kind of stillness that makes you realize how far you really are from everything. We zipped up the tent and tried to sleep, but there was something about that silence that didn't sit right. You ever feel like you're being watched, even when you know there's no one there? That was the first time I heard it. Just a small noise. Distant. Could have been anything. I told myself it was nothing. It wasn't. The hike in was quiet in a way that stays with you. We didn't see another soul the entire time. No distant conversations, no hikers with trekking poles, not even a plane overhead. Just us, and the sound of our boots crunching into the dirt. The further we walked, the more the world behind us faded. Trees grew thicker. The air smelled cleaner. You start to forget you have a phone. Not that it would have mattered. There was no signal. A real dead zone. Which was part of the appeal. We found the lake late in the afternoon. A still body of water tucked between low ridgelines, wrapped in pine and stone. No footprints. No fire rings. It looked untouched. We dropped our packs and didn't say much at first. We just stood there and took it in. We set up camp a few feet from the shoreline, tucked just enough into the trees to block the wind. Threw together a quick meal, filtered some water, and sat around until the sun disappeared behind the peaks. It got cold faster than I expected. We slipped into our tents, said our goodnights, and zipped everything shut. That first night, I woke up around 1. It wasn't a gradual kind of waking up. No dream, no need to pee, just awake. And then I heard it. Crack. Not loud. Not close. Just there. I lay still, listening. A few seconds later, crack, again. Then something softer. Leaves. No, not leaves. More like the sound of pressure, weight, shifting across the forest floor. My first thought was elk. It made sense. We were in their territory, after all. And those forests are known for them. But I've heard elk before. They move differently. There's a pattern to their steps. These didn't feel like that. It didn't sound like walking. It sounded like waiting. There'd be a pause. A long one. Then a single step. Then nothing again. I stayed still for what felt like forever. Didn't even unzip my sleeping bag. I didn't want to make a sound. I told myself it was just an animal passing through. I told myself it didn't care that we were there. Still, my ears wouldn't stop listening. At some point, I must have fallen back asleep. Not deeply. You don't sleep deeply after something like that. The kind of rest where your brain stays half on. Morning came. sunlight leaking through the mesh of the tent. I sat up, stretched, unzipped the door. Everything looked exactly the way we left it. No tracks. No mess. No broken branches. I even walked around the camp, just to be sure. Nothing. And that almost made it worse. The second night felt different before it even began. Same lake, same tent, same trees standing around us like old statues, but I couldn't relax. Not really. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was just tired, that the mind can do funny things out in the woods. Still, I kept glancing into the trees while we cooked, listening harder than I needed to. Every little snap or flutter made me turn my head. We went to bed earlier than the night before. Less talking this time. I didn't say anything about the sounds from the night before. I wanted to, but I didn't want to be that guy. You know, the one who ruins a good trip with weird stories and half-remembered noises. So I kept it to myself. But my body didn't forget. I laid there for a while, just staring at the roof of the tent, waiting for sleep to come. It didn't. And when the air shifted, just enough to feel colder than it should have, I knew what time it was. I checked my watch. 1:03. Then it started again. A sharp snap. Another one, off to the side. Same as before. But this time, it didn't stop there. I heard something different. A sound I couldn't place right away. Not a step. Not an animal sniffing around. It was soft, steady, and far too smooth. It sounded like something dragging across the fabric of the tent. Slow. So slow, I thought I might be imagining it. Like a fingertip gliding over nylon. Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it was the zipper. That's what it started to sound like, the zipper of the rainfly. Being moved. Just a little. Inch by inch. Barely enough to hear. I held my breath. I didn't mean to, it just happened. My ears were doing all the work now. Every little sound felt close enough to touch. It didn't make sense. Who, or what, unzips a tent like that? So quietly, like it was trying not to wake us. I didn't move at first. I just stared at the ceiling, hoping it would stop on its own. Hoping it would turn out to be wind, or some part of the tent settling. Something I could explain in the morning. Then I heard it again. A light, dragging slide. Same spot. I couldn't take it anymore. I shifted hard on my inflatable pad, on purpose. Loud, sharp, obnoxious. The kind of noise that makes raccoons scatter and birds take off. I wanted whatever it was to know I was awake. The dragging sound stopped. Just stopped. I waited for a reaction. A scurry, a snap, some sign that something had run off. Nothing. Just silence. Heavy and still. The kind that feels like it's listening back. I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. I laid there until the sky started to lighten and the air began to warm again. Every few minutes, I thought I heard something. A twig shift, maybe. A breath of wind through the trees. Or maybe I was just hearing things because I wanted so badly to hear nothing. When the sun was finally up, I sat up and checked the tent. The zipper was exactly how I'd left it. Pulled tight. Fully closed. No marks. No scratches. No signs of anything unusual. But I know what I heard. And I know how it felt. It wasn't until we were halfway through the hike back out that the thought really hit me. What if it wasn't an animal? What if it was someone? I didn't say it out loud, but it just sort of settled into my head. Quiet at first, then louder the more I walked. The kind of idea that creeps in slow, and once it's there, you can't ignore it. What if someone was out there, watching us, following, the noise, the dragging sound, the way it paused when I moved? That didn't feel like a wild animal. It felt like something that knew we were there. Something that understood what a tent was. Something that didn't want to be seen. And that's what scared me the most. Because if it was someone, they had to hike in just like we did. Carry gear. Plan ahead. No easy access. Which means they meant to be out there. On purpose. And they didn't want us to know. And if they were watching us that first night, if they were creeping around the tent, they could have done anything. We would have never known. We were asleep. Or close to it. I kept trying to figure out how there were no tracks. No broken branches. No sign of anything. It rained a bit that second morning. Just enough to leave the ground soft. I checked the whole area before we packed up. Nothing. Which made the whole thing worse. Because animals leave tracks. Even careful ones. Especially something big enough to drag across the tent or fiddle with a zipper. And people, even more so. You don't move through that terrain without leaving something behind. Unless you know how to hide it. Or, unless it wasn't a person either. Now, I know how this sounds. Trust me, I wouldn't be saying this if I hadn't looked it up later. But apparently, people have heard things in those woods before. Not just noises. Stories of tents being scratched. Footsteps in the dark. Low vocal sounds that don't quite sound like people. But don't sound like animals either. There's even talk, online, in forums, from folks who've had weird experiences in that area. Some call it Bigfoot territory. Some say there's something older out there. A watcher. Something that mimics people. Or at least understands them. I don't know what I believe. But here's what I do know. I've camped plenty. Hiked through plenty of places. Slept in forests deeper and darker than that one. And I've never felt that kind of stillness. That kind of silence that feels like it's waiting on something. Whatever it was, I don't think it wanted to hurt us. But it definitely wanted us to know it was there. We didn't hang around long that morning. First light hit the lake, and we were already stuffing sleeping bags into packs and tearing down camp in silence. Neither of us said much. Maybe it was the lack of sleep, or maybe neither of us wanted to bring it up first. I kept glancing around, looking for footprints, broken limbs, even scuff marks near the tent. Nothing. Clean ground. No drag lines. No signs of any animal coming through. No claw marks. No scattered food. It was like nothing had ever been there. And maybe nothing had. That's the part that messes with your head. My friend brushed it off on the hike back, cracked a few jokes, chalked it all up to forest sounds and an overactive imagination. We're not used to real quiet, he said. Brains start filling in the gaps. I laughed too, just to keep it light, but I didn't believe it. I didn't tell him how long I laid awake. I didn't tell him about the zipper noise, or whatever that dragging sound really was. We've done other trips since then. Plenty. But I don't sleep the same anymore. Not out there. I sleep lighter now. Ears always open. Even when I think I'm asleep, part of me is listening. One crack of a twig or shuffle of a branch, and I'm awake again, staring at the ceiling of my tent, remembering. Most nights, it's nothing. Probably the wind. Maybe a deer. Just the forest being the forest. But every once in a while, it sounds like something else. Maybe it was nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. The forest keeps its secrets. That night, I think I almost heard one. Have you ever heard something in the wild you couldn't explain? Drop it in the comments. I might read your story next. Next time, I'll share a story from someone who came face to face with something that shouldn't exist.